Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our session today for the menopause support. This was actually required by the women in the Chinese community. However, we thought it's such a great learning opportunity to raise awareness, to understand what support is out there, and also making sure people around us who understand and support us and to help us to get through this tough journey. So we have invited many people outside our community because it's delivered in English so everyone can understand. We will also be recording it, especially the important parts of the slides and the lecture itself, which we can share online after the session. However, to respect everyone's privacy, we won't record the question and answer time because this might have some sensitive information. Now I'm going to pass on to Eve, who is behind the scene, who has organized this event for us all. Please, can you give an introduction to us all for Bev? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Faustina. Thank you, and thank you everybody this morning, and thank you for your time, to join us. This is organized by a Chinese woman Peterborough charity group, and Bev is menopause specialist trainer and a coach and author of the book The Business Menopause, a guide for working women. She's a director of Florical Training Limited and a specialist in menopause in workplace training providers. Bev have over 32 years working, experience, which was Minister of Defence. Her final 10 years in learning development, delivering training to both military and civilian personnel. And then she, gathered and organized all her experience, own experience as well of menopause, which led to her recognition as a trainer. And then she started her own company. So not going to say too much. I will let Bev to lead the whole webinar for everybody. Here we go, Bev.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Yes, thank you for the introduction. So yes, I spent a long time working for the MOD, and when I turned 50, I had my first hot flush. That was my first physical experience of what I thought was the start of my menopause. What I realized with hindsight was that actually I'd probably been experiencing perimenopause symptoms for about 6 years before that, but I didn't recognize them as menopause symptoms. And what I found was when I went looking to try and understand what was going on, I found a distinct lack of accurate information. I could find lots of information, but it all seemed a little bit contradictory and a little bit confusing and a little bit OTT, if I'm honest. It all seemed a little bit too focused on an individual's experience, and I just knew that I wasn't relating to a lot of what I was reading. So I went on a bit of a journey of discovery to find out what all this menopause stuff was about, but it wasn't really helping me in my job. And long story short, after 2 years I ended up leaving the MOD after 32 years, and I started a business of my own, basically helping women who were experiencing menopause with things like their nutrition and their exercise. I trained as a nutritionist and also as a personal trainer. So I was coming at it from a health and well-being angle. And then I got a phone call out of the blue from the Royal Air Force, who I'd worked for 30 years, asking if I would deliver some menopause in the workplace training. And that was 4 years ago. Since then, I've worked with lots of different businesses across all sectors, so the charity sector, the public and the private sector, to raise awareness of the impact of menopause on women in the workplace. So it's an absolute pleasure to be invited to talk to you today. It is going to be quite heavy on facts and on the kind of the science, if you like, behind menopause, because I think that's what's really lacking is the understanding of what is going on. There's a lot of mystery and a lot of mystique around menopause, but I want to try and break down some of that mystery and leave you with some factual information that you can go and make an informed choice about how you want to manage the menopause. And it's interesting because if we read a lot of the research that's been done, it suggests that certain cultures around the world don't have menopause. They don't have any symptoms of menopause. And my feeling is probably they do, but it's not talked about as much. And I think it's a taboo subject in many ways. So my goal really is to break down some of that taboo and hopefully give you the tools that you need to feel a bit more empowered to go and get the help that you might need to manage it. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so that's who I am anyway. So let's talk about the terminology. Let's get the wording, first of all. Then we'll look at what the hormones are. We'll look at the symptoms. We'll look at the impact they can have on your quality of life. We'll go quickly into the different treatment options available, although I guess some of that might come up in the Q&A because I haven't got time to go into big detail throughout the lecture. We'll have some signposting to further help, and then the recording will stop and we'll go into a bit of a Q&A. So to start with, I really want to talk through the terminology, the different definitions, so we know exactly what it is we're talking about. Because a lot of the words tend to get used interchangeably when they're not the same thing. So menopause means the stopping of the periods. It's 1 day, 12 months from the date of your last period. So 1 day is menopause, that's it. Anything before that 1 day, when you've been 12 months period free, is classed as premenopause. So in all of our normal child reproductive years, from puberty, when our periods start, to menopause, when our periods stop, we are premenopausal. From that 1 day of menopause, when our periods stop, until the day we die, we're postmenopausal. Now, knowing when our periods stop isn't always easy. If we've been taking contraception or if we've had a hysterectomy that's forced our periods to stop, it might not be quite so easy to know when we reach menopause, but diagnostically, that's where that 1 day of menopause comes from. What we're really talking about when we talk about the menopause and the symptoms associated with the menopause is a term called perimenopause. And that just means around the time of menopause. And it's the years leading up to that 1 day of menopause and a few years post-menopause when we're likely to be symptomatic. The perimenopause starts anywhere between 2 to 10, 11, even maybe 12 years before we reach that 1 day of menopause. And the average age in the UK for women to reach menopause is 51. In Asian communities, it tends to be younger. It's normally around about 49. But anywhere between 45 and 55 is seen as normal. So it's quite a large age bracket. There's no one size fits all. We're all very different. But if somebody reached menopause between 45 and 55, it would be seen as a normal menopause. From 40 to 45 is seen as an early menopause, and that affects about 5% of women. But there is a condition known as premature ovarian insufficiency that affects about 1 in 100 women, and it's where a woman reaches menopause without any kind of surgery or medical treatment to stop her periods under the age of 40. We don't quite know why it happens, but it affects about 1 in 100 women under 40, about 1 in 1,000 under 30, and about 1 in 10,000 under 20. So we tend to think of menopausal women looking like me in their 50s, grey hair. In reality, menopause can happen at any time in life from puberty onwards. And as I say, it affects about 1% of women under 40. So you could be a woman of, say, 46 who has gone through menopause, you've reached menopause, you've been 12 months period free at the age of 46. It's quite young, it's the young end of that age bracket, but it's still within normal boundaries. But your perimenopausal symptoms could have started 10 or so years before that. So actually, we need to be talking to women in their 30s and early 40s, because this is when many of the symptoms are starting to show up, but we don't necessarily recognize them as being menopause. Other reasons why women might reach an early menopause is if they have to have any kind of surgery that removes the womb or the ovaries, both of which can bring on either an immediate or an earlier than expected menopause. And certain cancer treatments can also bring on either a temporary or a permanent menopause, depending on the surgery and the treatment. So there are many, many reasons why women will experience menopause much earlier than the stereotypical 50-year-old woman wafting herself with a fan that we tend to imagine women in menopause to look like. So hopefully that explains the terminology. I want to just give you a very brief biology lesson. I'm not going to go into deep scientific detail here, but I think it's really important that we understand what is happening. When we enter perimenopause, we have 3 key hormones that begin to decline. Our hormones are chemical messengers that send messages around the body. They send messages to the brain to make all of our body functions work the way they're meant to. And as we enter perimenopause, these 3 key hormones, along with lots of others, but these 3 key ones start to reduce, decline, and fluctuate as we head towards no longer having periods. Estrogen, we tend to think of as the reproductive hormone for women. We tend to think of it as the female hormone, but actually men have estrogen too. We just have it in different amounts. Estrogen is a key player in terms of reproduction, but we also have estrogen receptors on every cell in the body. And that means that when estrogen levels start to fall, depending on which part of the body is deficient, we can see lots of different symptoms. So we have estrogen receptors in our heart, for example, and as estrogen levels drop, our risk for heart disease goes up. We can feel things like heart palpitations. Often women are sent for ECGs to test their heart, and it's literally just estrogen reducing. Estrogen is also present in the bones. And as estrogen levels fall through menopause and beyond, we can find things like brittle bones, osteoporosis, osteopenia. Often women in older years have fractures. They fall, they trip, and they break the femur or some of the big bones because they're very brittle and they lose density. So estrogen is heart protective. It's also bone protective. And the big one that's coming through now from the research is that actually we have a lot of estrogen receptors in the brain, and they help with cognition. So they help the synapses work in the brain to keep our brain functioning the way it should, which is why as estrogen levels fall through perimenopause, we have things like brain fog, poor concentration, forgetting words, memory issues. And actually, we do know that older women are at a greater risk of dementia and Alzheimer's than men because we lose the protective element of estrogen. So we tend to think of it as just about making babies, but it has a much, much broader role in the body. And when we look at the symptoms, they make a lot more sense when we understand the role of these hormones. So estrogen, massively important in lots and lots of different functions in the body. Progesterone, again, another key sex hormone, but it's very closely linked to our mood hormones. So as progesterone levels start to fall from about our mid-30s, we can see things like anxiety, low mood, tearfulness, depression. A lot of that is to do with progesterone, also things like anger, rage, and irritability. And you may have witnessed this if you have premenstrual low mood. So the week or so leading up to your period, if you find that your mood swings are quite dramatic, that's often to do with progesterone levels fluctuating. And then finally, we've got testosterone, which we tend to think of as the male hormone, but actually, interestingly, premenopausal women produce 3 times more testosterone in the ovaries than they do estrogen. So we're very, it's a very important hormone that also has testosterone receptors across all of the cells in the body. And again, as testosterone levels start to fall in perimenopause, we can see things like a drop in libido and sex drive, lack of confidence, lack of clarity of thought, muscle strength can reduce, and our metabolism can slow down. So testosterone is very much about strength, libido, and brain function. And these 3 hormones, whilst they're not alone in the job of reproduction, they are quite key hormones. There are others going on, but these 3 are the ones that cause most of the problems. And our hormones want to work in balance. So they work with other hormones in the body to keep everything working the way it should do. But as our sex hormones start to fall, it can impact other hormones, things like our stress hormones, cortisol, epinephrine, you might have heard it as adrenaline. Our stress response goes up as our cortisol release is greater. So often women in perimenopause and postmenopause find that they don't manage stressful situations as well as they did premenopausally because their cortisol response is much greater. Metabolic hormones, things like thyroxine and anabolic hormones, insulin, are also knocked out of balance. So postmenopausal women are at a higher risk for things like hypothyroidism or type 2 diabetes. Doesn't mean that all perimenopausal or postmenopausal women will become diabetic or will have low thyroid function, but we're at a greater risk of developing these conditions. And as I've already spoken about, progesterone can affect our mood hormones. So things like dopamine, our feel-good, happy reward hormone. Serotonin is another mood hormone, which as it falls can leave us feeling quite flat and low. And melatonin is our sleep hormone. So all of these hormones can be knocked out of balance, leading to things like insomnia, poor sleep, mood swings, depression, anxiety. So it's very clear when we look at the role of hormones why there are so many different symptoms. And we're going to look at the symptoms now. So we know that there are at least 35 recognized symptoms of menopause, and they can be put into 3 different areas. We have physical symptoms, cognitive or brain function symptoms, and emotional, psychological symptoms. But what we do need to remember is that not everybody will experience symptoms. There are no 2 women the same. So just because one woman experiences certain symptoms doesn't mean everybody will. We are all very different. And about 25% of women won't have any symptoms at all. They'll sail through menopause, they'll look back, they'll realize they've not had a period for more than 12 months and possibly wonder why everybody's making such a fuss. But the reality is about 75% of women will have symptoms to varying degrees. Some will have them at mild to moderate, others, about 25%, will be at the other extreme and have quite severe, debilitating symptoms. And I'm talking about severe symptoms that can result in relationships breaking down, careers being ended, lives being ended. There's a spike in female suicides in the late 40s, early 50s, which coincides with that perimenopausal bracket. So we need to be aware there's a real spectrum here of how we experience menopause, and whatever your experience might be, it is likely to be very different to somebody else's. So what are the symptoms then? I put this slide up here because if anybody's going through this, they might recognize the goat in themselves when they go to try and do something and they've forgotten why they've walked into a room. But I just wonder, how many of those symptoms do you know? Now I don't think I can see the chat. Let me see if I can, Yes, I can. So I don't know if you want to just use the chat function to just start typing some of the symptoms that you may be aware of, and let's see how many come up. Sweating, that is really common. So a lot of women find that their internal temperature gauge messes up, and they can end up with things like insomnia, poor sleep, exhaustion, fatigue, finding their sleep deprivation. Depression is very, very common. Hot-tempered and snappy. Yeah, that's again that progesterone dropping can lead us feeling irritable and angry or tearful. Hot flushes are the very common symptom. So they're the ones we tend to associate with menopause. In actual fact, very many women find that they don't get hot flushes until much, much later through their perimenopausal journey, until they're probably closer to the to reaching menopause. Headaches are very, very common, especially migraines. What else have we got up here? Anxiety and depression are very common. So I'm going to go through some of the ones that you might not associate. You may not have joined the dots to realize that these are all menopause related symptoms. So if I start with, I'm so sorry, the bin men have just arrived, so my dog might go a bit crazy. We'll start with the physical symptoms. So we've got things like hot flushes and night sweats, but there are also things like incredibly itchy skin, dry eyes, dry mouth, heart palpitations, digestive issues, bloating, acid reflux and indigestion, restless legs, leg cramps, muscle pain and muscle soreness, joint aches, vaginal dryness and vaginal discomfort, urinary tract infections and bladder infections, also things like hair loss, hair getting very thin and dry, a metallic taste in the mouth, tinnitus or a ringing in the ears. All of these symptoms are related to lowering hormones. Also things like changes in menstrual cycles. So we can find that our periods become very light, or for some women, a large majority of women, we can find that our periods get very, very heavy, very erratic, leading often to flooding. Also, things like weight gain are very common. And if we move on to the cognitive, the kind of the brain function symptoms, we can see things like forgetting words, so poor word recall, lack of verbal fluency, not being able to talk as fluently as we always used to, lack of concentration, lack of focus, also sort of just short-term memory issues, not remembering why you walked into a room, or not remembering your best friend's name. And then we've got the emotional and psychological symptoms. So things like depression, low mood, anxiety, rage, anger, also so lack of confidence, low self-esteem, a feeling of isolation and loneliness. Often women find that they want to withdraw from society a little bit, withdraw from their social circle, because they either don't have energy, they're absolutely exhausted with fatigue, they're not sleeping very well, perhaps body shape changes have knocked their confidence, or hot flushes mean that they just don't want to go out and risk that embarrassment of a hot flush. But these symptoms are very, very normal. They can be treated, but they are very normal. And it's certainly something that we need to be aware of. Often when we go to our doctor, the doctor doesn't realize that all of this range of symptoms are related to low hormone levels, and they're related to perimenopause. So very often women are being offered antidepressants rather than hormone therapy, which would help with things like anxiety and depression, but also a lot of the physical symptoms as well, and the brain function can be helped by hormone replacement. Just looking at the time. So, as I say, a vast range of symptoms, and when we look at the role of the hormones in the body, those symptoms start to make sense, because without understanding the hormones, you might ask, well, how can one condition, how can just stopping your periods result in everything from sort of leg cramps all the way through to a ringing in your ears, or weight gain all the way through to urinary tract infections? Well, it's because, as I said earlier, we have estrogen and testosterone receptors across the whole body, and as they fluctuate, we can see symptoms in all different areas of the body. And often these individual symptoms are treated in isolation, whereas if we know what they all that they're all related to perimenopause, we can put the jigsaw puzzle together and start to realize that actually this is probably perimenopause. And if you're in that age bracket of anywhere from sort of the very late 30s right up to the 50s, and you're experiencing 2, 3 or more of these symptoms, then chances are it's likely to be perimenopause. I haven't got time to go into sort of the doctor's testing. We can potentially look at that in the Q&A if anybody's interested. But there isn't a clear test to say when we're in perimenopause, because our hormones fluctuate so much. So generally speaking, we can look at the range of symptoms, keep a log, if you like, of our symptoms, and realize that actually these are all perimenopause related. Let's go and do something about it. So what can we do about it? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You can see from that range of different symptoms that actually it can have a major effect on our quality of life. So if you think about the effect it might have at home, with our relationships, with our partner, with our teenage children, perhaps with our young children, if we're not understanding what's going on and we just seem to have changed, and what people are seeing is this person who always used to be very, switched on, very good memory, never forgot anything, never really got snappy or lost their temper, and suddenly we've changed. If we're not aware of the reason for that, it can create some conflict within the home. And the same at work. If you're in the workplace and you feel like you're losing confidence and competence because your brain fog is there, or you're feeling low, or you just feel like you're not performing in the same way that you used to, or you're exhausted, you're fatigued, you're getting hot flushes, it can have an impact at work. And we can either do what I did, which is not the best result, which is to resign a good job, or we can end up falling out with people in the workplace. So or just withdrawing away from people. So it's really important that we're aware of the impact of the symptoms and do something about it. And of course, in terms of intimacy, if we're struggling with things like vaginal dryness and vaginal discomfort, exhaustion, stress, and loss of libido, then it's going to have an impact on our intimate relationships if we're not able to talk about it and talk through what's going on. If our partner doesn't understand, it's really important that they are educated as well to understand what's going on, because it will have an impact on our self-esteem and self-confidence if we let it, and it will potentially have an impact on the other people around us if we don't communicate and talk about it. So let's look at, I'm going to skip this slide because I don't think it's quite as important in this setting as it is in the workplace, but I really want to talk about what help is available, because at the moment I've painted a pretty bleak picture of the menopause with all those symptoms, and it all sounds a little bit doom and gloom. But I want you to know that actually there are definitely things that you can do to manage your symptoms. There are natural and sort of therapy-based routes that we can look at. We can certainly look at our lifestyle habits, how much exercise we get, how we manage our stress, and what we eat. And all of these things kind of work together. They're not mutually exclusive. But I wanted to start with hormone replacement therapy, not because I think it's the most important necessarily, but it is probably the most misunderstood. So hormone replacement therapy is a form of medication that literally replaces the lost hormones, estrogen, progesterone, try that again, progesterone and testosterone that we're losing as we go through perimenopause. So much like a diabetic would replace their insulin, perimenopause is as a drop in our sex hormones. So hormone replacement therapy literally replaces those lost hormones. The problem is it's had a really bad reputation for the last 20 years following a very flawed study that was carried out in the early 2000s that created or found a suspected link between hormone replacement therapy and breast cancer. We actually know that that study was flawed and that the information that it gave was massively inaccurate, and the reporting through the media overplayed the risk quite substantially. What we now know is that the vast majority of modern hormone replacement therapy is incredibly safe, very effective. In fact, it's the most effective option for managing the short-term symptoms of menopause. It's quite a complex subject, so I don't have time to go into it all here, but we can certainly cover off a few questions in a moment or two in the Q&A. But what I would like to get across is, if you're struggling with menopause symptoms, don't discount HRT because of fear. The fear is unfounded. The facts are that for the vast majority of women, about 99% of women, the benefits far outweigh the risks. And actually, while you're taking HRT, you're protecting your heart, you're protecting your bones, and you're protecting your brain from Alzheimer's. So there are very, very many benefits that aren't often talked about when it comes to hormone replacement therapy. But it is a choice, and if that's not the right choice for you, for whatever reason, there are other alternatives available. So herbal alternatives, things like red clover, black cohosh, oil of evening primrose, St. John's wort, a lot of those sort of natural herbal remedies may help with managing symptoms. What they won't do is give you the long-term replacement of the lost hormones, but they may help. And other therapies that can be very effective are things like acupuncture, aromatherapy, reflexology, also meditative therapies using things like yoga, tai chi can help with managing stress and help you to kind of manage that. So we know that stress exacerbates symptoms. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of talking therapy, often used by counsellors to help with trauma, but it can also, we do know that cognitive behavioral therapy can really help with managing both the physical as well as the psychological symptoms of menopause. And then, of course, we've got lifestyle interventions. And I think, what can we do in terms of our nutrition? Well, I use a model called NEST, which looks at nutrition, exercise, sleep and stress, and our thoughts and feelings, or how we think and feel about menopause. So in terms of good nutrition, it's pretty much the same advice that you would give to anybody, any population. It's about managing the amount of reduced or processed foods you eat, eating a high number of plant foods, so nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, rice, grains, whole grains, lots of herbs and spices as well can really help to manage those symptoms. Watch your caffeine and alcohol consumption, because both of those can impact sleep and can also trigger things like anxiety and also hot flushes. Make sure you get plenty of protein and fats in the diet. So often we eat a large number of carbohydrates, which is a problem, but we do need to make sure that we're eating enough nutritional fats and protein as well, and getting plenty of water. And also, you might find that if you keep a diary of your symptoms, you might find that there are certain foods that trigger symptoms more than others. So identifying those and either reducing or eliminating them from your diet for a short time until your body adapts can help. Exercise is massively important in terms of managing symptoms, especially for things like osteoporosis, offsetting the risk of brittle bones. So exercise helps to strengthen bones. So staying fit and active, but also including strength training. So we're actually putting some stress on the muscles and the bones to maintain that strength and bone density. So things like yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, all of those sort of restorative exercises can also help, but just make sure that you're moving often. We do tend to find that as our energy levels drop, our motivation drops, we may not be as active as we were when we were a bit younger, but now more than ever is the time to really think about either starting an exercise regimen or increasing what you're doing or maintaining it, because we don't want to risk later life things like osteoporosis, poor coordination and balance, poor strength. Sleep and stress, it's really important that you try and give yourself the best opportunity to get a good night's sleep. Our body likes rhythm and it likes routine. The problem is when our hormones are upset, it tends to throw our sleeping out of balance. But giving yourself the best opportunity by going to bed and getting up at roughly the same time every day, even on the weekends, keeping the bedroom cool but not drafty, limiting how much time you spend looking at your phone or a laptop or watching TV or a tablet before bed. If you can kind of stop that an hour or so before bed, it gives your body a chance to create the melatonin that we create in time to get us ready to sleep. Also, things like meditation and mindfulness can really help with sleep and also managing stress, getting some quiet time, taking time for ourselves. So not something that women do very well, but you really need to look after your own health and your own psychological well-being if you want to help the other people that we normally tend to be running around after. So sometimes we have to be just a little bit selfish and take that time for ourselves. And managing your own time as well is a key one. That's something that often gets more difficult as we head through perimenopause because stress changes. So finding ways to manage your time better, either by getting other people to do some of the stuff that we tend to take on, we do want to try and do everything for everybody, or just getting rid of any need to do jobs all of the time that may not actually need to be done. So just, looking at your time management, getting rid of, delegating some tasks and ditching some others can really free up time, and that can really help. It's not easy. I get this as women. We do tend, especially midlife women, we tend to have an awful lot going on, but we can sort of help to manage that. And then finally, how we think and how we feel about menopause and getting older can really impact how we experience our menopause transition. ABC is the way I think about this. So acceptance is fundamental. We need to accept that menopause can happen at any age. It's not an indicator of getting old. Most women reach menopause in their sort of 40s to 50s and live well into their 80s or 90s. So it's certainly not a sign of old age. It's the start of something different, something new. It's like our second spring. It's the start of something different, where we're letting go of some of the pressures and stresses that we've had in our younger years. So acceptance is really important. And that starts us thinking about, well, what are our beliefs? What do we believe about our role in society? What do we believe about our own self-worth as we go through menopause? If we believe that menopause is going to be a miserable time and that it's going to mean that it's the end of our value to society, then we're going to have a very unpleasant experience. If we change that belief to, actually, this is the start of my next chapter, this is me letting go of all of the things that I've had to deal with in my younger years, and it's my time going forward. I've got a wealth of wisdom and knowledge and experience that I can take forward. That is a much more empowering belief system. And that change in beliefs gives us choice. Understanding what menopause is and how we can manage it gives us choice. And when we have choice, it puts us back in control and we feel much more empowered. So that whole mindset piece, the thoughts and feelings, is really important. And we can help get that change of mindset by looking for social support. Look to your communities, find positive role models that you can sort of look to for inspiration to move forward. Think about maybe coaching or one-to-one or group support sessions, all of which can really help. The big problem with menopause is because it's so diverse in its symptoms, we can really feel like we're the only person going through it, but we absolutely aren't. That, you know, talking about it can really help. So what can you do? I think sometimes just sitting down and taking stock and thinking, well, how severe are my symptoms? What do I want to do about them? Do I want to look at hormone replacement therapy? Do I need to do something with my lifestyle habits? Do I need to improve my fitness? Do I need to manage my stress a bit better? Do I need to book in a bit of time for, a massage or a bit of reflexology once a month just to help with that? Do you need to speak to anybody? Do you need to speak to your partner and make them aware of what's going on? Do you need to speak to your family? Do you need to speak to your boss? Or would it be good to speak to a friend that you trust that you can talk to? Are there books that you can tap into? I've got some resources. And thinking about what are your belief systems around the role of women as we get older, and can you challenge those? Are they real or are they a perception? And then think, what can you do at a practical level straight away? What one thing can you take away from this session and think, right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to speak to my partner, or I'm going to make an appointment with a GP and I'm going to discuss hormone replacement therapy. What one thing can you do? So just before we come to an end, I realize that's a huge amount of information I've just thrown at you. I don't expect you to remember it all, and I don't expect you to know it all, but I have given you links to some further resources. So if anybody's interested in finding out more and taking their learning a step further, I have some resources and things, my free stuff. I also have some stuff on my website. I also have a Facebook group called Your Best Midlife, which you're very welcome to join. It's an all-women group for predominantly women over 40 looking for support. But there's also some great resources out there. Balanced Menopause is run by a lady called Dr. Louise Newsom, the UK's leading authority on menopause. And she's created an app, excuse me, called the Balance app, which is just packed full of really useful information. And you can also track your symptoms, and you can actually download your report to take to your GP showing your tracked symptoms. It's a fabulous app. Balanced Menopause website reflects that. It's got lots of good information. And if you are going to speak to your GP, there are actually nice guidelines. There are guidelines to guide your GP as to what they should and shouldn't be doing when helping you to manage your menopause. And then finally, the British Menopause Society is the leading authority on menopause, and you will get really good quality, well-researched information from there. They also have a patient arm called the Women's Health Initiative. He very kindly mentioned my book earlier. I've put a range of books up there that I think are really well written, well researched and accurate. There are a lot of books out there that aren't, but I've put a list to some that I think are worth reading. So I hope I haven't blown your mind with so much information. I'm just going to stop sharing now, and I will, Faustina, if you want to stop recording, and I'll start taking questions.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you very much, and it's really refreshing to hear about the acceptance and choice, because in my mind I was getting old, I felt miserable, but it was really nice to hear that it's a choice, we make. So thank you very much. Not just the understanding of the menopause, and also the aware of the symptoms and the treatment options and the support out there, and also further reading. This is just been amazing. This is one of our events, and we also have other events like, you know, health checks and hate crime and crime awareness. We have this coming up. If anyone would like to follow us on our Facebook page for our next event, you're more than welcome to attend. Just to explain for the question time, me and E wanted to ask everyone, if you want your question translated, we're here to support. If you don't, then we'll just remain silent, okay? I'm gonna stop recording now, so your question is, you know, all confidential, it's not gonna be shared with anyone else, okay?